I don't think it surprises anyone that the New York Knicks were going to be one of the more active players in free agency this offseason. I mean, they really, based off of their situation and circumstance, don't have much of a choice. This is a team with very few players under guaranteed contracts going forward. This is a team with all types of holes all over its roster. A team that basically has Carmelo Anthony and a bunch of third, fourth rate backup dancers, if you're being perfectly honest, combined with the fact that this is a team that doesn't have their first round pick in 2016. What a great move that was. And now you're sitting there and talking about a team that has, again, some money to spend under the salary cap. It's reasonable to expect that the New York Knicks are going to look to be active in free agency. They have to. I mean, because, yeah, while they need to rebuild and they need to build through the draft and everything, it's kind of one of those situations where they can't just build through the draft in part because of the market that they're in, how long they've been as bad off as they have been. The fact that you've got Phil Jackson running the show indicates that you don't have as much from a long term standpoint in terms of patience to exhibit, combined with the fact that you have one star player getting paid a ton of money in Carmelo Anthony, who now, unfortunately, is on the wrong side of 30. There's a lot of things pointing to the Knicks. We're going to have to spend some money, get some veteran presences, get some veteran players to some decent money contracts in free agency. And now we had heard a lot of the rumors and reports heading into free agency about what the Knicks were going to do. They were going to pursue Greg Monroe with a max contract. They were looking to sign a guy like Arron Afflalo, maybe to a deal that paid him as much as 12 to 13 million a season. Maybe they're looking at other guys potentially, even bringing in guys like, let's say, LaMarcus Aldridge and DeAndre Jordan. Even those weren't really necessarily reasonably expected to get either one of those players. I wanted to see how the Knicks played this out because we've been down this road before where the Knicks had cap space and a lot of it, and we're going to go into free agency and be big time players. And I remember the last time that they did this, they ended up with Amari Stoudemire and they gave him $100 million over 5 years, and yeah, the rest is history. Just because you have a bunch of money to spend, it doesn't automatically mean that that money is going to be used wisely or that your team is going to see big time improvements because of that investment that you can make into the roster, into the organization. So I wanted to see, was Phil Jackson going to panic? Was he going to make a bunch of knee-jerk, ridiculous reflex type of signings in free agency, throw a bunch of money at the problem and just hope and pray that things work out? I was curious to see. So when I heard that the New York Knicks signed Arron Afflalo, or came to terms with him at least at this point, I was like, okay, that move makes some sense. But to me, it was all about the dollars and whether or not they ultimately made sense. And I got to say, based off of the player they signed and the terms and conditions of this contract, this Arron Afflalo signing was a great move by the New York Knicks. It really, truly was. When you look at the Knicks, here's what they've got right now, basically. And I may forget a name or two, but pardon me if I do, because frankly, does it really matter? You've got Carmelo Anthony. You've got your alpha dog, if you will, getting that max money. You've got your first-round pick, the 4th overall selection from this year's draft, in Kristaps Porzingis. He's a guy who will surely get some opportunity in this year, but in all intents and purposes is a year or two away from really looking to make any type of impact at the NBA level. You had the deal where they sent off Tim Hardaway Jr. to go get a guy like Jerry Grant out of Notre Dame out of this year's draft as well. So you've got 2 rookies coming in the fold and a guy in Jerry Grant who has some versatility in terms of the fact that he could play both guard positions, a guy that could put the ball in the hoop, and would seem to be the type of perimeter player that Phil Jackson would like to have for Derek Fisher in that triangle system. You've got a former second-round pick in Clay Anthony Early, who might be able, based off of opportunities afforded to him on this Knicks roster, be able to show more of what he could do, similar to what he showed you at Wichita State. Now you bring into the mix a guy like an Arron Afflalo. You're looking at a 6'5" wing who's a solid defender, maybe not as good as he was a couple of years ago, but a solid defender nonetheless. A guy who's a decent floor spacer, a guy that can hit an open jump shot and provide you a lift from three-point range, which is going to be important when you're playing alongside a Carmelo Anthony, because in that system, that triangle is predicated on the ability to hit the mid-range and long-range jump shots. And a guy like Afflalo has exhibited that ability throughout his NBA career to be able to hit that mid-range and especially long-range jump shot, to provide that type of spacing for Carmelo Anthony, who, as his career progresses, more and more becomes a post player that you run that triple post triangle offense through. You're looking at a guy in Afflalo, too. When you have a team that doesn't have a lot of veteran presence, doesn't have a lot of playoff experience as a result, you're talking about a guy in Afflalo that's played in 35 playoff games throughout his career. Not a ton of playoff experience, not a lot of championship experience, obviously. Same with Carmelo Anthony. But there's a veteran presence there. There's a leadership there. There's an understanding for a guy like an Arron Afflalo at this point in time in his career, what type of player he is, what he can bring to the table, and how he can fit into a particular team system to help both the team and himself ultimately as well. This is a really good deal, and in particular, what I love about this deal is what it allows the New York Knicks to do. It basically allows them to give a one-year trial to this guy, where they can sit there and see how Afflalo comes in and contributes, how he fits, how he maybe gets along with younger players like Porzingis and Grant, guys that are going to be a part of the future of the New York Knicks. You get that one-year trial, and it basically $8 million. Now, granted, it's a 2-year, $16 million contract. All right, but there's a player option in the second year. So I'm treating it as basically a 1-year, $8 million contract. You're basically paying Afflalo just about what he was getting paid last year in that contract that he just opted out of with Portland, which was about $7.75 million or so. So you're not really giving a guy much of a raise. He's all of, 29 years old, I believe it is. So he's still a guy that really isn't on that much of a downswing yet. He's probably at the low end of what his peak is, all the while, even if he had a bad year in 2015, 2016, and he opted in, you're basically getting the chance to have a guy on a second contract year, and again, only paying him $8 million for 2016, 2017, when the television revenues will increase exponentially and that salary cap is going to explode. So if Arron Afflalo has a bad year, then you've got a chance at a redo at a reasonable price. And if he plays well and decides to opt out, then you've provided yourself all different types of options in terms of if you feel like he's a part of what you want to do going forward, you could potentially look at re-signing him for 4 or 5 years, maybe at a $12 to $13 million figure and not feel too terrible about it, especially based off of what the salary structures of the NBA are going to be going forward once that new television money does come into play. But you also have the option to say, hey, for what we're paying this guy and what we would have to look to pay this guy, we just don't really see where the benefit is there. We don't see where it's the most cost effective. And basically, you're taking $8 million back off of the books that you can reinvest in your team with another position or two and perhaps another player or two. I mean, I love this. I love this deal for the New York Knicks. They're committing a minimal amount of money, in my opinion, to Arron Afflalo for a short period of time, almost basically like a one-year prove-it deal. I usually really like one-year prove-it deals. And that's pretty much what this comes out to. It's a one-year prove-it deal. So it's an opportunity for Afflalo to have a better season in 2015, 2016, and perhaps make himself some more money on the open market again come next year. It's a chance for the Knicks to get a one-year trial, basically try it before you really buy it in the case of Afflalo. And if it works out and you really want them there, then you have the opportunity after that first year, to go into the market and bring them back. Or you could sit there again. You want to move on from them and invest somewhere else based off of what else is going to be available in free agency. You have that opportunity as well. But more importantly, I think for the Knicks is the fact that they've been bad for so long and they've been a joke pretty much for so long that bringing in a guy like an Afflalo is a nice, solid move. And what it does is at least makes you look a little more respectable. It's not just throwing a bunch of horrible money at a bum player. You're throwing solid money at a solid depth guy, contributor at the NBA level. And what this can also allow the Knicks to do is perhaps be a little more competitive. Now, playoff team, probably not, but a little more competitive in 2015, 2016, and that's going to be really important. Because you're going to have a Carmelo Anthony hopefully back in the fold for an entire season and hopefully healthy this time coming off of injury. With a guy like an Afflalo in the fold, he will give you that versatile wing player that can space the floor some and be a solid defender. I mean, like I said, this is a a move that, if anything else, now they'll probably give money to somebody like a Robin Lopez, maybe 12, 13 million a year, which is kind of so-so, but I understand based off of the position he plays and the systematic fit why it makes sense for them. It's a chance for the Knicks to at least be a little more respectable. It's at least a chance for the Knicks to show progress, especially, again, because they're not going to have their 2016 first-round pick. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for them to sit there and tank the season because they're just basically giving either Denver or Toronto, ultimately, based off of what happens, the opportunity to have a much higher bonus pick in the first round of next year's draft. So why not sit there and give them the lowest possible pick that you absolutely can? And in the case of the New York Knicks, now you head into that 2016 free agency period where guys like Kevin Durant hit the market. Not saying you'll be able to get him, but there will be other guys on the market as well, and perhaps you'll have even more room available under the salary cap, especially, again, once that cap number explodes in size, once those television revenues come in, and the New York Knicks could be in a good position, a bit of the catbird seat in terms of being able to go out and get a big-name free agent, maybe two, or get a couple of really solid players, and make at least some type of a run as a playoff contender in the Eastern Conference, which, frankly, for the New York Knicks would be incredible progress at this point in time. The Afflalo signing is minimum risk, potentially decent level of reward. I don't see how anybody couldn't like the signing. I know I most certainly do for the New York Knicks and for Arron Afflalo as well.